Hello everybody, welcome back to another KP's Place YouTube video and podcast if you're listening over on Spotify for podcasters. This is KP and that would be me. We are back with another Crown Jewel video here with our reactions to everything that went down at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia's event this past Saturday. So WWE put on this big show, really awesome looking match card. You know, there's a lot of talking points to come from this. There's a lot of big points that we're going to go through right here and now. I am joined by Scarlett here today, Scarlett Phoenix. Just the two of us doing this one because we've had a lot of technical difficulties prior to getting this one out there. So unfortunately, this is the only screen that will be available on this video. But one screen is better than no screens as far as we're all concerned. So how about we dive into everything that went down at Crown Jewel? We're going to be starting with the kickoff show match, and that would be Sami Zayn taking on JD McDonough. So we didn't really expect too much from this sort of matchup to begin with here. It was essentially what you would expect from a kickoff match. Sami got the victory ultimately in the end over JD McDonough. The match would play the part they was meant to, warming up that Riyadh crowd. Sami would get a nice reaction to, get them up on their feet, get them ready for the main show. And the match itself was fine, to be honest. Nothing special. Nothing particularly bad could be really said about it. But yeah, given the time the two had in the ring, found the match to be a decently good watch. The finish was pretty good from my perspective. You saw Sami Zayn hitting the haluva kick, following up with a blue thunder bomb to get the 1-2-3. I quite liked that. I thought it was a nice change for Sami, rather than just going for that haluva kick as we are so accustomed to of recent times. So yeah, maybe he's going to be transitioning now into maybe like a combination there, going for the haluva into the blue thunder. That could be something to take from this, like a main talking point. But yeah, served its purpose, did what it needed to, warmed up the crowd, and got them ready for the main show to begin. I gave this one a 6.5 out of 10. Not too bad at all.
Yeah, I think you hit most of the points there. Nothing too special. I think just their attempt to get Sami on the show. The main takeaway for me personally was I thought maybe that could have been a match to let JD pick up some momentum, but alas, it was not. Then we have that gnarly red bruise on JD's torso. I guess that would be the torso area. I couldn't stop looking at that. That progressively got worse as the match went on. That was kind of that was kind of hard to look at. But then, yeah, I like the blue thunder bomb, even if it was, after the haluva kick. I think we've had this conversation exactly, but I think Blue Thunder Bomb is a really cool move and it should be a finishing type move. I think you should be able to put more people away with it. So I'm all for elevating that move, so to speak. But yeah, a nice way to get things started. Yeah, the crowd for Riyadh here was pretty hyped. So it's a fun little start.
Yeah, good way to warm up the crowd. Got them all ready. And the main show would start off with one hell of a matchup. And it was the WWE World Heavyweight Championship match that featured Drew McIntyre facing up against Seth freaking Rollins, obviously the current champion there, going into it as, probably the favourite really in this one, I suppose. Seth's been on this crazy sort of like run of recent in terms of like fighting against adversity, dealing with his back injury. And the match was a pretty good start to the show, in my opinion. Seth and Drew had a pretty hard-hitting contest, which revolved really a lot around Seth absorbing a lot of punishment. He would take a lot of pain, a lot of abuse towards the back throughout the duration of the matchup. Drew would land, I think some of the spots that I remember is he lands some belly-to-bellies during it. He would launch Seth into the steel steps. There was a sidewalk slam onto the apron. But none of it was enough. Seth would pick up the victory in the end. He would continue to hold the championship that he's been keeping on to so desperately of recent times. A couple of really close near falls I thought were actually really good during the matchup as well. I think there was a Seth Rollins kick out that I particularly remember. That was like 2.999, taking a page out of Roman Reigns' book there. But yeah, a couple of enthralling moments. One criticism I do have of the match, I don't know if I'm being a little bit too nitpicky here, is I thought it was a little bit slow in parts. Like, I think there was a one point when I was watching the matchup, I always felt like it was in a little bit of slow motion. I'm not sure if that's just me being like heavily critical there, but it was just something I just sort of picked up. I was thinking, you know what, like with a matchup there's like Seth and Drew kicking off the show, you think, wow, that's going to be like incredible and stuff, and you know, but yeah, I thought Drew, maybe it was down to his attitude maybe towards the matchup. He seemed like almost blasé about it, but not in like a character way, more like a body language way. I don't know if maybe he was a little, I don't know, bemused with the result and stuff perhaps, but yeah, I don't know, he didn't seem to be like fully 100% into it, I didn't think. But I don't know. Maybe I'm overlooking things. Well, maybe I'm looking too deeply. Nevertheless, I thought it was a really good match. I actually was really hyped by the start of the show. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. So I really did enjoy the matchup. Just yeah, maybe being a little bit too critical with the pace and stuff per se.
No, it's funny that you mentioned that because I kind of felt like the match was underwhelming. And this may be one of those cases where we talk about hyping up a match or a card or something and then having these huge expectations, like I'm sure most did with these two involved. And then it just felt a little flat to me personally. I didn't rate it near as highly as you. I was sitting here debating between a 6.5 and a 7 personally. Just give it a 7 because the last, and WWE has a knack for doing this as well. Your last 5 minutes, just constant near falls. But it did feel like they really relied heavily on that last 5 minutes to kind of make this match what it was. I felt like the pace did drag a bit. And not only that, I felt like this match was a little sloppy. Considering the two people that are there, I don't feel like either of them have a history of being sloppy. At least off the top of my head, I can't recall either of them. And I just felt like there were a few spots, like 3 or 4, I think I remember counting, where it was just like it felt a little off. And so maybe you're onto something. Maybe Drew wasn't 100% invested. And we had the big delay with the signing of him, his contract and whatnot. Maybe that didn't go well, and he's just there kind of going through the motions. I think another point could be, I don't think you could say it's underutilized at this point because they've been hyping this Seth backstory for how long. Maybe that's worse than they're leading on. They're clearly using it, and you never know how kayfabe it is, but maybe that was an indicator of why the match kind of felt flat and a little sloppy. But yeah, and I think it's like in the kickoff show slot, you're expected a pretty fast-paced match. So maybe this was just in the wrong place on the card. But yeah, I give it a 7. I feel a little generous for doing that.
Wow, yeah, that makes me seem really, really generous, to be fair. Give it a much higher rating, even though I did criticize it a little bit heavily towards the end of that. But yeah, I think you make some good points there as well. Like, obviously, we don't know how bad this Rollins injury is, and I guess maybe with Drew not perhaps being 100% into it, maybe that helped Seth out a little bit. I don't know. He did seem to take a lot of abuse in the contest, but yeah, I don't know. It did feel a bit strange. I'm glad that you agree with me there. I'm glad I'm not being too heavily sort of like critical into that.
Yeah, and I think maybe it was just a matter of a combination of the two things. Maybe Seth's back along with I'm sitting here thinking about this too. Like, when's the last time Drew's been in a long match? Obviously, he had that pretty long period where he wasn't wrestling at all. So maybe he's a bit rusty. He's been in quite a few matches, but none of them have been long as of late. So maybe that's a part of it. One other thing I had noted within the match, I won't even try the name because I know I'll butcher it, but they referenced the announcers that at the very beginning of the match, Drew did a celebration off of a football player, and the announcer said it, but they didn't show it. But he started to do it, and then they kind of panned away. So I found that interesting. I wonder if there's some kind of copyright issue there. But yeah, some football celebration that he was mocking, and the crowd really dug on that. I was curious to get your take on that as a huge football fan that you are.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten all about that on my review. I do remember actually. Yeah, he was lining up for that Ronaldo Sue celebration. But it was like I think he shouted Drew during it. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, as he was going to do it, as he went to hit it, the camera panned to I think the crowd, if I remember rightly. I do remember saying at the time, like, oh, they just completely missed that. So yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, I thought so as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the decision making there was, but yeah, they completely missed that. I don't know if it's maybe just like, oh, we're in Saudi, get someone to do a homage to Ronaldo whilst we're here. He's playing his football over there at the moment, so yeah, it could be something like that. I don't know. But hey, I think when you look at that match and then you look at what followed it up next, I guess you could say the pace was a lot different in this one because this one was the WWE Women's World Championship match. We had the likes of Nia Jax, Raquel Rodriguez, Shayna Baszler, Zoe Stark, and obviously the champion herself, Rhea Ripley. And yeah, I talk about the difference of pace here because obviously you've got two people one-on-one, very different scenario to that of a fatal five-way, right? There's always going to be stuff going down. It's going to be hectic. It's going to be chaos. You got to have eyes in the back of your head, and there's constantly things to have a little look at. So let's go down dirty with this one then. So I thought the match was actually all right. Produced an expected winner as far as I saw it. Like I didn't really see any other way that this match was going to go. I thought some nice spots throughout though. Were like there were those spots that included like a number of the women involved in the match. I think there was the Shayna Baszler locking in 3 submission holds at the same time. Like, don't get me wrong, I thought it was a little bit on the cringe side, but I actually thought it was decent because you have someone like the submission machine like Shayna Baszler, and like you get her into that position where she's going to sort of like showcase her abilities and stuff. And I thought that was quite actually a cool moment. But that wasn't the only moment in the match. There were other points where they got more than like 2 or 3 women involved in each particular spot, and that played to the fatal five-way quite nicely, I thought. Raquel looked a little bit dumb for the finish, I thought. That's some of the main criticism there. Like you don't notice Rhea Ripley and Zoe Stark on the top rope. So she's like crawling over for the cover. I don't know, like in my opinion that did seem a little bit I get what they're trying to do. I get why they're doing it and stuff, like make like a unique finish, but it did seem a little bit dumb from Raquel's perspective. They're having to sort of slowly crawl across, but just completely, missing Rhea, who's literally just up to the left of her. But yeah, it allowed Rhea to showcase a bit more of her power and dominance there. Obviously, hitting the riptide off of the second rope from Zoe Stark onto the couple of bodies in the ring. I thought it was a decent finish, but yeah, just that one little bit from Raquel I thought was a little bit annoying there. But the match seemed, I don't know, a little bit juddery in parts, but I didn't think it was that bad, to be honest with you. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I thought it was all right. It could have been a little better, but I think it showcased all 5 women enough. I think maybe if it was an elimination match, it would have been a lot more fun. But again, I understand why they didn't do that. Don't want to have Nia taking a pin. I get it. It makes sense. But yeah, not a bad match. I didn't think so.
Yeah, this one didn't do it for me. Particularly, yeah, the finish, and there were just a few spots, but I think just in general, I can't think of a ton of Fatal 5-way matches that I've enjoyed, or Fatal 4, or Triple Threat for that matter, when it comes to the women's division, because it just feels like they're always overbooked. They each have their specified spots, and they're supposed to hit those, and Raquel being the one that you mentioned, like we all saw you look up at her and then jump over. It looked really silly. And unfortunately, I think that probably the thing that sticks out the most, the Shayna submission was, I guess it was something. I don't know. I didn't really view it as good per se, but it was there, I guess. And I don't know. It was a bit chaotic. I think. I think the one thought that I had was, they're booking it this Fatal 5-way so they can get a title on Nia, for better or worse. In this case, much worse. I thought that's kind of where they were going, but they kind of did the opposite. They had her in the match and then had the other 5 so she wouldn't get pinned. Maybe I think you might be on to the right logic there. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really get the the benefit of it. I think the only person that really came out looking good, in my opinion, is Zoe and Rhea. I'm high on Raquel, but she's got to start figuring things out real quick, I think. And then Shayna took the pen. That's interesting. They really haven't done much with her since beating Ronda. Thought maybe they'd execute on that and strike while the iron was hot, but they really haven't. So Nia's there. I guess we'll see. I'm sure she'll be in the picture soon enough, unfortunately. But yeah, the match was fine. I give it a 6 out of 10.
I think the main problem with this type of matchup is you look at it from if you look at it as your classic heel and face, right? So obviously you got Rhea as the champion, she's a heel. You got Nia, challenger, heel. You got Shayna, challenger, heel. Zoe, challenger, heel. You got Raquel Rodriguez, challenger, face, who ultimately should be a heel, right? To get the best out of her. I think they don't really tend very often to go from a like. So like a heel to a heel champion to a face champion. I don't know. I think the dynamic for this one was very interesting. In order for Rhea to lose, you're thinking the most likely person to lose here was Raquel Rodriguez, obviously changing from a heel to a face championship reign there. I don't know. The dynamic was odd for this one. I really thought it was. So like having one of the heels take a pin here is going to be harsh. Maybe you could have argued that Stark could have been the one to take it. Obviously, Shayna took it. Yeah, again, I like you said, I think that is a bit of a strange choice when you've had her defeat Ronda Rousey, send her back in. Ultimately, is now becoming the new baddest woman in WWE. And then, the first big match that she is involved with afterwards, she takes the pin for. It is a very surprising decision. I'm not entirely too confident that was the best way to do it.
I guess the takeaway for me is Rhea still, one, considering she was outnumbered that way, don't look like she's in for the long haul. I think at least till Mania, probably.
Yeah, I think so for definite. Yeah, she comes out on top as, we all know that Mami likes to be in that position. She came out looking strong. I tell you who else came out looking strong after Crown Jewel, and that is the winner of the next matchup here. We had Solo Sikoa taking on John Cena, and yeah, when I say someone came out strong on top, Solo came out smelling like a bed of roses here. Honestly, going into it, I had no idea who I thought was going to win. You can make arguments for both here. I think Cena I think he was doing his best to try and get us to think there was a chance that he could beat Solo. And I felt hook, line, and sinker. I think a couple of the other guys might have done as well on the predictions video. Yeah, went into the match I'm thinking, Cena might win here. Solo should have won. And Solo ended up winning. So I was actually quite relieved at that, to be fair. I think Solo deserved to get the victory here because he needs to get back into winning ways. He needs to get into a run of form. And he is the enforcer of the bloodline. So he needs a big victory like this over arguably the greatest of all time, John Cena. Let's talk about the match, though. Pretty good match, in all fairness. I thought Cena's last few matches leading up to this one haven't really lived up to the bill. So this was actually quite refreshing to see. The match had a very back and forth feel to it, which isn't really a bad thing. The flow of it was quite nice. The finish was pretty brutal from Solo. As advertised on SmackDown the night before, they said that it was going to be exactly like that. But the way he did it, like he hit multiple Samoan spikes in a row to put Cena down, I thought it was a really fitting end to the match, like from Solo's perspective. There was a little bit afterwards, Cena having a bit of a farewell, to the crowd. Has he had his last match? I'm not too sure about that one. That's another conversation. But yeah, the match itself was actually pretty good. I thought both men quite impressed here. Obviously, like I said a moment ago, John Cena's recent matches have been pretty poor. So this one actually went a bit longer. We actually saw a bit more from John, taking a lot of abuse, to be fair. I think Solo was the best of the two for the most part of it, with obviously the odd moment here from Cena getting some offense from here and there. But yeah, Solo really showed up, and what a badass, right? There's no better way of really looking as dominant as you can with a victory like this over someone like John Cena as well. Add that into it. I just think Solo comes out of this one looking like an absolute beast, and it's a great decision from from the higher ups to book it that way. Really, really makes them look strong. I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. Quite entertaining watch. Loved how vicious the ending was. Yeah, big fan of this one, to be fair. I like the dynamic.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think pretty much all points you made. On the predictions video, I mentioned at this point, I'm shocked as how many losses Solo has. I would have never thought that would have been the case. And they kind of right the ship with this one. Definitely gives it I think John really got us with his promo, saying how long it'd been since he'd won. I think he really sold us that he had a chance, and Solo really put those thoughts to rest. And I don't want to be too dramatic here, but I feel like you really created a star with this match. He beat John Cena, and to what people are speculating is beat him into retirement, kind of like a Kurt Angle angle that he did with Baron Corbin. I kind of had that kind of feel to it. The veteran puts the young blood over. I kind of got that feel. I'm 99% sure that's not the case. I feel like they'll hype up his retirement match as a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Maybe they'll do that one twice as well. But yeah, I don't get this last match, but wow, what a statement win for Solo. Yeah, and I'm assuming the reason that they kind of built it like that and he walked off like he did in a retirement fashion is maybe that's the last time he's in Crown Jewel from a wrestling standpoint. But what a class act putting over Solo like that. He really made him look good, and I feel like you definitely created a star that I think we kind of been waiting for that big statement win from him, and I think this was it. I don't think it was the best match by any means, but the theatrics around it I think kind of made it better than what it was. So I would give this one a 7 out of 10.
Completely agree with you. Yeah, I think the theatrics, like you said, did make it what it was. Yeah, like you said, building a star out of Solo, I think that's the main take from this one, and they did a pretty good job of it, as far as I'm concerned. So, let's move along now then, swiftly as we can. We're going to move on to the United States Championship match, which followed the Cena-Sikoa. And we had Logan Paul challenging against Rey Mysterio for the US title. So in recent times, I know I've been particularly critical about this, as has Scarlett. The United States title picture has been very, very hit and miss, and I want to say more miss than hit, really, in the past few months. Back end of Theory's reign into Rey Mysterio shenanigans with the title. It's all been very chaotic, very strange booking wise, and just hasn't really made much sense. I said on the on the predictions video that just giving it to Logan Paul would make even less sense, so that's what they're going to do. Was I wrong? They've given the United States Championship to Logan Paul. He would defeat Rey Mysterio. So now SmackDown have two part-time champions, which is a very strange dynamic over there. It has a bit of a weird feeling to it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But in terms of the match itself, I actually thought the match wasn't bad. Kind of similar to John Cena, Rey Mysterio's last few matches have been very subpar, I think is the right way of describing it. Rey's not really sort of lived up to how he can go, how we know he can go. So this one was a little bit different. I think it went a bit more of the distance. I thought it was a bit more of a stretched out match. It was quite enjoyable. It had different segments in the middle and stuff. It wasn't rushed as far as I was concerned there. There were some nice spots during the contest. We had that avalanche fall-away moonsault slam from Logan Paul, which was freaking great. Regular high-flying offense from both men. There was a particular point where I think Rey Mysterio went for a springboard moonsault, and Logan Paul had to catch him. He had to innovate the catch just to protect Rey Mysterio. That was quite good from Logan. He could have been in a bit of better position to begin with, but it showed really good recognition for him to be there for Mysterio. So that was pretty impressive as far as I was concerned. Finish was your typical heel type victory. You have the brass knuckles. That's a classic, right? We all know the history with those in the business. What really got to me though was Santos Escobar. So he would come out and he would put initially a stop to one of Logan's lackeys, one of Logan's cronies, whatever you want to say, getting involved and helping him out with the brass knuckles, right? Fair enough, you'd expect that. But here's the weird part, right? So when Santos was chasing this guy, Santos would just put the brass knuckles on the apron. Like, okay, so let's just break that down for a second, because Santos put the brass knuckles on the apron, right? He knows that Rey Mysterio is never going to use them. No chance in hell. Too prideful, too respectful. So that wasn't going to be the case. So, I mean, you put them on the apron for one reason and one reason only, right? Surely, he's tried to screw Rey Mysterio. Is that the only thing we can take from that? Because if he didn't, if that's not his intention, then that ending makes no sense. That finish makes no sense, because obviously you know what happened then. Rey Mysterio would go for the 619. Logan would take it originally, and then when Rey went for the springboard, Logan would dish out that right hand with the brass knuckles, hits the 1-2-3, becomes the new United States champion. So yeah, if you ask me, it's a strange finish unless Santos is about to turn on Rey Mysterio. I think that's going to be the direction they go in here, in which case I'm all for it. Bit of Legado maybe instead of the LWO. I'm not too sure if they're going to go back to that, but that's another discussion for another time, I suppose. But yeah, Logan gets his first championship in WWE. As I said, 2 part-time champions on SmackDown. Not the greatest of looks, to be fair, for the SmackDown brand, but I suppose let's see how it turns out first. I'm not going to get too ahead of ourselves. Maybe Logan's going to stick around for a bit now. Obviously, he's going to have to really be a bit more regular. Surely they can't get away with having no-show reigns and Logan Paul, who's going to be part-time. It can't happen. There's going to be no gold to get on SmackDown, right? It's just going to be irrelevant. So yeah, we'll see how it goes first. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves criticizing that. I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. I quite like the matchup. It was quite fun, and Logan winning was just, well, you know, it's a crazy decision, but you know, fair freaking play if they can make this work. I think he's going to give the title a bit more of a interesting dynamic going forward now. So we'll see how he does with it.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest takeaway is, wow, they really did it. They really put the title on Logan. Not to say he's not deserving. This entire match, I'm just sitting there in awe of how good this guy is in the ring and how little experience he's had. I don't know if they're going to. Honestly, if I were WWE, I would do my best, and I don't know if it's possible to sign this guy for, you know, a full-time contract. I don't know if that's an option, if he would do it. But imagine how good he could be, you know, on a full-time schedule. I just never ceases to amaze me how good he is for how little work he's put in, from wrestling standpoint. So I don't know. I'm excited to see where they go, and as we've kind of discussed, it can't be worse than the reign that we just had the last couple ones. So you know, worst case scenario, if he's here, you know, twice a month, still probably going to be a better reign than what we had. Just because, you know, with his kind of social media status, I think it can only help elevate the title. I can't see it being any worse. So that'll be interesting to see where they go with that. I could also see it being like a Rey wants a rematch, or, you know, thing on SmackDown, and we give the title right back to him. I could see that happening too. Just for the moment at Crown Jewel, they have done that a couple times, especially with the women's tag titles. So I could see that maybe happening. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. And there were a couple of spots there that I think, one that you mentioned where Logan kind of caught him. I don't know, because their heights differences are quite big, but that's nothing new to Rey. But because he is up there in age, I kind of wondered, and I don't know if we'll ever know, if there were kind of a couple of spots that looked kind of off. I don't know if that's on Logan or that's on Ray. Because I hadn't really noticed him botching anything. I guess we did have that one bit with Ricochet. So I kind of wonder who that was on. But I really enjoyed the match. That, the couple botches that they did have, I think Logan pulled off to make it look like it wasn't. So he's, and then you have Ray, who's obviously very dependable. So I'm kind of curious to get your take on that. But I really enjoyed the match. One of my favorites of the night. Gave it 8.5 out of 10. I thought it was a lot of fun, and although I could have done without the heel ending, but broken record. So I think with the Escobar bid, I think it's got to be what you said. He left it there on purpose. I don't see him, teaming up with Logan by any means, but I don't think that was unintentional. Them leaving that there, and that'll be a story between them because there's no title to go after now, assuming Logan moves on. So, but yeah, really enjoyed it. I'm curious to see who do you put Logan up against, assuming this is going to be a title reign, a legitimate title reign. Who would you put up against him? I feel like the obvious answer would probably be Ricochet, but curious to get your thoughts on that as well.
Ricochet would be a great call. I really do agree with that one. Ultimately, though, it comes down to the brand split, and I think that they will try their best to sort of adhere to that. So I think when you look at the rest of the SmackDown roster, I would probably say someone like LA Knight, perhaps. They've had a little bit of back and forth in the past. Well, I say in the past. I think it was one promo or something, wasn't it? It wasn't exactly a lot, but I felt like that maybe was hinting to something down the line. I think a lot of people were thinking that Logan was actually going to go up against LA Knight about was it a couple of months ago or something like that? I can't remember now exactly. It was previous show, but that hasn't materialized since. But now that he's got the US title, people are crying out for LA to have a championship. He just obviously we'll get to LA against Reigns a little bit later on. I think maybe that could be a route to go down. I don't know what you think maybe that one, but yeah, Ricochet is a great call as well if they want to just have an exception of that brand split.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with LA Knight and Logan Paul. I think that has almost seems too big for a Survivor Series, like a Rumble match. But yeah, we'll see. I think it'll just be interesting to see how they book Logan as far as his attendance goes. So.
Yeah, agreed. And also what you said earlier about him becoming a full-time talent, I think if that is something that's on the cards, they probably should try and do it because, like you say, he's got so much ability for someone who hasn't done this for very long at all. So the sky's really the limit for him at this point. He's a mid-card champion now, purely on a part-time basis. He's turned a lot of heads, impressed a lot of people, myself included. I think that, ultimately he just goes from here, and now we get to see him in a championship perspective. And this is a completely new thing for him. So, it's another way of impressing people. Is he going to have a good reign? Is he going to have a bad reign? Is it going to be short? Is it going to be decently length? I think a lot of eyes are on him now, especially. So that'll probably generate a lot more interest from maybe people who like Logan for who Logan is. So, yeah, I don't think it's a dumb decision by WWE. They know what they're doing, putting a title on him. Having said all of that, how about we move along now then to what followed, and that was the WWE Women's Championship match. So you had Bianca Belair taking on Io Sky. And before I get all excited, let's talk about the match itself. So the match here, I don't know, I think that a large part of my review here is based on the latter stages, but I'll try and be as diplomatic as possible. So I thought both women actually showcased themselves pretty well throughout. I thought it was quite very back and forth. I think I mentioned that in the Solo and Cena match as well. Had a sort of similar vibe to that. Nice pace to it, which led to an absolutely brilliant finish, in my opinion. You know what? Let's just get into it. Let's just get talking about it. You had Kairi Sane return, so she would come back in quite surprisingly, out of nothing. And she would help out Io Sky in order to secure the championship, make sure it stays with 1/3 of Damage Control. I loved the way that it went down as well. So you had Kyrie to sort of come out and basically just bring it to Bailey. Well, not bring it to Bailey, bring it to Bianca, stop her from attacking Bailey. Maybe think, there's some sort of alignment there, perhaps between the three of them. Obviously, Dakota is a fourth somewhere, but obviously she wasn't present at the time. I liked that. And then once Bailey knew what had gone on, she looked completely taken by surprise, which adds another layer onto things. If you remember back to a few years ago now, when Kairi Sane left WWE, Kairi was ran out because of an attack by Bailey. So it's sort of come full circle now for the role model. It's sort of very much a case of long-term booking there. And I love the fact that they've gone down that route. I think it just makes complete sense. So yeah, that's like my particular take from this, like a really, really big selling point for why this match ended so well. It does bring up a lot of questions, though. Is Io on her way out of Damage Control? Is Bailey being forced out of Damage Control? I think there are a couple of areas that you can go down here, and yeah, there's definitely different point to take from this. The crowd did annoy me a little bit, though, because they didn't really react to Kairi at all. I think if you do that in the USA, anywhere really, she's going to get a bit of a pop as a minimum. So the Saudi crowd, I don't know if they didn't even know who she was. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it wasn't. Or if they just weren't that hyped. I don't know. I don't think they were particularly loud for the women's matches in general. But yeah, I felt like this was almost wasted on the crowd because they didn't really appreciate it too much. They didn't show their appreciation anyway. But yeah, the match was pretty good. Bianca and Io, we know what those two women can really can get up to in the ring. Both very very talented individuals. It looked great on paper, and ultimately the match itself went pretty much expected from how I was looking into it originally, except the finish, which was it exceeded my expectations. To be fair, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Like I say, loved the ending, and the match was good as well. So yeah, big dubs all around in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's hard to talk about the actual match when the after effects leave so many questions and was so exciting as it happened. I know the both of us have longed for her return, and yeah, unfortunately, it did feel a bit wasted on the Saudi crowd. But I do think you're correct in that. Not to get political in the slightest, but they just don't care about women's wrestling, unfortunately. But that being said, I know everyone at home and back in the U.S. was, and Japan for that, probably everywhere else, was super excited to see her back, and look to have kind of a heel dynamic to herself. Both her persona and her actions, I think, kind of speaking to that. That'll be interesting to see her as a heel. And yeah, I think as for the match itself, though, I was a bit disappointed. It felt like the match was cut a little short. I don't have the exact time, but it did feel like it was cut a little short. But for the time that we did get, the dynamic between the powerhouse and the quick, agile Io was a lot of fun to watch, and I would love to get a couple more of those back here in the U.S. or somewhere with a more deserving crowd, I'll say. But yeah, it was a really fun match, and I think that both of them, the abilities of Bianca and that German suplex would put Kairi on her, or Io on her face, and just the abilities that Io has in the ring, I just are still super underrated in my opinion on the main roster. I think a lot of people still maybe starting to see it now, but I think that's why they need to give her a long reign. As for the questions that are kind of posed after the match, I don't see any other way. I think this is the end of Damage Control, and unfortunately, I think it was a big flop as far as what it could have been. Obviously, Dakota being injured wasn't planned, and you can't plan for those kind of things. But even when she was there, it wasn't being handled like it should have been. But yeah, and if Io tags with or sides with Kyrie, which I don't see why she wouldn't. It didn't indicate that was going to be the case. Then I think Bailey doesn't have anyone else in the damage control. So unless she builds, some other people in damage control, I just don't see that happening. I think Bailey maybe go back to being a face. Maybe, I don't know. She's been a heel so long, it feels weird to think that one time we yearned for a heel Bailey so bad. But yeah, really fun match. Obviously, what happened afterwards just as fun and as exciting to see what they have planned for them. I don't have to tell you personally, but Kabuki Warriors being formed again would be great with Asuka maybe. But we'll see where they go. I'm excited to see where they go with that. And I think Bailey has kind of been, for a while, she carried the division. And I think, unfortunately, she's kind of been the stepping stone for a while now. So I'd love to see her, if they do, in fact, break up damage control, get her back in the as a strong singles competitor. So, as for the match itself, gave it 8.5 out of 10 for me. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you make some very good points there, to be fair. I think regarding the Bailey situation, I think it's quite an interesting conversation to be had because, like you said, we craved for a different Bailey for such a long time, right? Obviously, the Bailey buddies, the hugger Bailey, whatever you want to call that particular gimmick, for such a long time, and then her heel gimmick was so refreshing and so badass, and it was arguably the best move of her career doing that. So, yeah, to now think that you could maybe go back to a face Bailey, it almost sounds a little bit like, you know what, it's sort of like going back on things. But I actually don't think I'd mind it. I think maybe a face Bailey now, with Io becoming a more dominant heel, with Kyrie by her side, forcing Bailey into this particular change of dynamic. I actually don't mind it. I think it'd be good. I think it'd be a good idea. I think it would be a nice, fresh role for Bailey to play. I think she's changed a lot during that time now. I think she's viewed in a different way from the audience's perspective. I think a lot of people generally do quite like Bailey. But yeah, I think this is actually a really good way to go. I'm certainly open to her being a face again. But yeah, Io and Kyrie on the other hand, forming an alliance. I think that has bags of potential too. So yeah, some very interesting points to come from this matchup, and the dynamic has completely changed between every woman involved here. The only person that really doesn't come out any different from this is Bianca Belair, right? The challenger. She loses, and no one's really talking about her, I suppose. So yeah,
I did want one more point. Sorry, I wanted to bring up one more point to that too. I think we've kind of alluded to this as well, but Bianca's kind of more heel tendencies lately, with her promos and whatnot, and I also kind of felt kind of that way with her moveset. The German suplex being one of them, but it just felt like she's being a bit more aggressive in the ring as well. So hopefully, that leads to a heel Bianca that we've been wanting. But I think, that kind of makes that dynamic. If Bailey doesn't end up going back to being a face, that makes it easier, because I feel like there are a lack of faces in the women's division, especially top ones. So I think that would kind of help offset that, and Bailey versus Bianca as heel face would be a lot of fun. Bianca's got to be wanting to get some revenge on her. She was out there just as much as Kyrie was. And then just wanted to give props to Kyrie's elbow drop. Is just an absolute thing of beauty.
The best in the business. I genuinely believe that. I know Macho Man is up there, but I think Kyrie's is clear. I genuinely do. The height that she gets, the technique that she has, I think it's fantastic. But yeah, with Bianca, like you said, she is sort of showing more tendencies towards being a heel. I think she is a lot more aggressive. The way that she's acting as well, like taking out Bailey on the SmackDown beforehand, the way that she did putting her through the announce table, and then really going after her during the matchup. Yeah, it definitely shows a bit more of a vicious side, more aggressive, more assertive, and yeah, maybe her going to that, that heel dynamic soon, I think will be great for her. We haven't seen heel Bianca since NXT, so it would be great. It would be really refreshing. Have Bayley and Bianca swap. I'm all for it. Definitely all for that. How about we go on to the penultimate match of the night now, which was Damian Priest taking on Cody Rhodes. And I think I made it quite clear that in the build-up here, wasn't really looking to hype up this match too much because I wasn't overly invested in it. But let's talk about how this one went down. So I described it, and I've gotten... I want to read it exactly word for word here, and this is like my reactions after the matchup, just to put it into perspective. So I wrote down immediately after I finished, if you'd given me the chance to predict exactly how this match would go, I'd have gone with exactly how it went in real life. So the match started off with great pace, both men coming out the blocks and showing some aggression early on. I liked that. That was good. Something that we hadn't seen from many of the other matches on the card previously, so it showed that these two really hated each other, and it gave them both the chance to sort of like raise that tempo straight away. Midway through, you had the interferences begin. Finn Balor, JD McDonough, Dominic Mysterio. And then, that's the Judgment Day dynamic. You have all the guys coming out, helping out whoever's in the ring, to ultimately see them through in the matchup. But they forget it was Cody Rhodes in the ring. It was the golden boy of WWE at the moment. And it doesn't work out quite like that, because even though Judgment Day had Finn, JD, and Dom all at ringside, all Cody needed was Jey Uso to completely cancel them all out. So the one Jey Uso was enough to have them all backtracking. He would send them back to the to backstage and whatnot. He would clear them out. And that would ultimately just leave Cody Rhodes and Damian Priest to finish things up. It was probably near enough all Cody after that moment. I think Damian might have hit a couple of moves, just to sort of like elongate things after that whole interference shenanigan stuff. And then Rhodes would inevitably see out the win shortly afterwards. It was an okay match, but my God, was it predictable out of the Judgment Day playbook? Yes, it was Judgment Day 101. That is literally the way you have a Judgment Day member lose. Except the only difference is maybe you could say that they would have had 3 against 3 outside the ring instead of 1 against 3. But either way, it was exactly bang on what you'd expect from this matchup, and Cody ultimately getting the win. Yeah, it makes sense. Cody, he needs to keep the wins up. He can't be losing to someone like Damian Priest at this point. It makes sense. I gave it a 7.5. Sorry, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Just because, I think besides all the criticism there, it was actually an all right match. Like I enjoyed the chaos, but again, it's just something we always see from these guys. It felt like a Raw main event. As has been the case for so many months now. Can we just get Survivor Series, please, right here, right now, just so we can end all of this? All of this needs to end very, very soon. Get them inside War Games, whatever you need to do. Get them all to beat the shit out of each other, and then they can all go their separate ways. That'll be absolutely fantastic. Just change the dynamic of Monday Night Raw, and we'll all be good.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about this one. I wasn't really looking forward to it. When I saw it on the card, kind of felt like it should have been on a weekly show. But the match was fun enough. Yeah, it didn't leave me yearning for more, but it wasn't terrible either. Typical Judgment Day stuff, as you alluded to. And Cody just makes for fun matches, in my opinion. I can't think of a match he's been in that wasn't a good one, and fun to watch. So, still not sold on Damian, but because I feel like this was more Cody making the match than him. But we'll see. We'll see what happens inevitably when he cashes in. Teased out a few, tonight as well. So, it was a fun match, fun enough. Nothing special. 6 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, let's talk about the cash in quickly because we didn't actually really mention it at the start there when we probably should have done. I say the cash in attempt. It was quite a funny one, right? I thought you had Damien coming out and it seemed very I don't know, like juddery almost. Like you had him sort of like saying to the referee, like, let's cash this in, and they were almost like waiting for something. Maybe Sammy was a little bit delayed. Obviously Sammy would then come out from behind and attack Damien, taking the briefcase and running off with it, ultimately causing, no cash in to happen. I think ultimately this one was a weird one because you had the World Championship match open the show, and then you had Mr. Money in the Bank competing later on. So I took any realistic possibility that Damien was going to cash in completely away from it, right? I don't know about you, but like I was literally sat there thinking, how's this going to go wrong then? He was never going to cash in with his match later on that night. It made no sense.
Yeah, and I don't know. The logic that we've had was, if he's on the card, he's not going to cash in, and I think that's kind of maybe one of the reasons why that title match let off was so he could at least tease it. But yeah, it's been a while. He's had this briefcase for a while now. I feel like it's got to be on Seth. Seth doesn't appear to be losing anytime soon in just a normal match. So I feel like it's got to be against Seth. That just, I don't know when he doesn't. He has a year to hold on to it, right? And what was it in May? I guess we're still 6 months out, but with Mania coming in, I assume they don't want to do anything last minute towards that. I don't know. That's interesting. It's an interesting point that seemingly comes up every pay-per-view now. So
yeah, it's a big talking point. I think the longer they wait, you sort of look at it down in two perspectives. Like they either know exactly when they're cashing in, or they have no idea and they're just prolonging it to hopefully figure it out at some point. I don't really know what it is at the moment because we always look back to it. Shinsuke against Seth, last man standing, that was the moment. Everyone will tell you that was the perfect opportunity. They didn't take it then. I don't know when they're going to take it, but at some point, they're going to have to. Unless they just have them forget about it and don't cash it in, which would be so dumb. I can't see that being the case. Maybe he gets desperate towards the end, feels he has to rush the cash in, and then ultimately doesn't get it done. I'm not too sure. But hey, we have one more match to talk about. It was the main event. It was the Undisputed Universal Championship, and it was LA Knight challenging Roman Reigns. So we all know how a Roman title defense goes, right? We all know exactly how these end up. And this one, it definitely fit the bill, right? It was out of the Roman Reigns playbook. It was nothing we didn't expect. Pretty much went exactly as planned. Let's break it down. So, honestly, I couldn't have been less surprised by the match. It was your classic Roman Reigns title defense for the majority. Started off with a nice bit of pace to it. LA would actually bring it to the Tribal Chief. So many Roman Reigns matches. We do see the dynamic is both men getting a feel for each other. Roman really slowing things down to start with, progressively, dismantling his opponent. I thought this one actually started off differently. So you obviously, like I said a moment ago, LA would bring it to Roman Reigns. It's exactly what happened, right? He took him by surprise a little bit, perhaps, with his eagerness out the blocks. But once Roman would get into control, then you'd see a classic, as I referred to a moment ago, taking it a bit slower, breaking down LA Knight bit by bit, and inevitably leading up to a fight back from LA Knight eventually that would come back into it. He would surge up, he would rise up, and he would bring it to Reigns. That would lead up to the interference, which you'd see Solo Sikoa walking down the ramp slowly, making a bit of a distraction. That led for Jimmy Uso to get involved and, to cause distraction. Then again for LA Knight, getting hands on. Knight trying to fend off the interference, proving too much for him. Reigns would take advantage. He'd hit the spear and he'd get the 1, 2, 3 shortly after that. it wasn't a bad match, but it wasn't anything special in my opinion. I thought Knight fit quite well into the main event picture. I don't think he seemed out of his depth or anything. Like I think I think a lot of questions were asked whether he could sort of like do it on the big stage. Obviously, massive matchup for the main championship in WWE at the moment. I think we can all agree that that title is held a little bit further in the prestige for that other world title. But no disrespect to what Seth Rollins is doing. I just think that, when you look at Roman Reigns, he has the title. But yeah, I thought LA Knight, he had a good matchup here. I thought like he didn't seem out of his depth. He wasn't, in too big of a pond. He did pretty well, and obviously the crowd were quite hot for him. They showed a lot of reaction to him, and they were hyped as hell. I like LA Knight as much as the next guy, so I'm going to enjoy him in this position, but I definitely didn't feel like he was above what he's capable of. So he was never going to be Roman. Let's be realistic there. But I think just to see how he did was the main sort of take from this as to where he goes from now on. Losing to Reigns is no, it's not going to do anything bad for you per se, right? He's not going to take any sort of like loss of momentum from this. Probably just going to recharge on Friday Night SmackDown, whatever he gets up to. And then we see another chapter of LA Knight perhaps going forward. But the match was, as you would expect, pretty standard from Reigns. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Yeah, I don't know. There's not really much else to say here. It was pretty much bang on from what we predicted, right?
Yeah, I unfortunately, more of the same. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think the loss hurt LA Knight. But I don't think anyone actually believed that he was going to win. But maybe that was just a test run. As you kind of alluded to, does he have what it takes to be in this scenario? I don't feel like he disappointed, and the Riyadh crowd was certainly behind him. And they weren't off everyone. They weren't hot for everyone. So this one seemed to go well. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a ton more to say. It just felt like I don't know. I like Roman Reigns, but the particular stick of what they've been doing. I mean, it's been how long? It just feels like it's more of the same. Kind of wish he wouldn't have the main event. It was nice for the few that we didn't have him main event, but we're back at that. We're back to that scenario now. So yeah, I think you said also earlier. I think LA Knight needs to go for a title. I think he deserves to. We've seen WWE botch these kind of things before, where they don't strike when the iron's hot. So I think this is something that they definitely need to put something on him. Roman till at least Mania, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure he's ever going to lose that title at this point, but the match itself was fun. The Riyadh crowd made it probably more fun than it would have been otherwise, which is the opposite of what happened to some other matches. So, I give this one a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, Roman's got the biggest grip on that championship I think we've ever seen, really, right? He just there's no realistic way of him losing it at this point, right? We've obviously gone through so many of these discussions now as to how Roman's defended them, who he could possibly lose to, whatever, what it's going to take, and we're still talking about it here and now. I mean, we're in November of 2023. We started talking about this like over a year ago. Yeah, the grip intensifies. He's probably going to be, like you said, champion until at least WrestleMania, and then obviously we see what happens from there on out. But yeah, I don't know. Like LA Fit, I like that for him. And ultimately now, what's next for him could be a number of options. Could it be Logan? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see what happens, though. But yeah, nothing really too much to say else about this matchup. Just obviously, it's a nice dynamic to see LA in that position. In terms of the overall show, like thoughts overall here about how everything went down. Just like generally speaking, I thought it had some nice moments in parts. There was like a fair few good results across the board. I think the booking was a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for here? It was a lot more expected than something of like Fastlane, for example. I think like there were some good decisions to come from these. I thought Seth against Drew was probably my match of the night. I think Io and Bianca came a very close second. Maybe you asked me on another night, I might change my mind. But yeah, I think those two matches were ultimately my preferred ones of the show. But yeah, I thought a large part of the show did have like a sense of mediocrity to it, to be fair. I don't know, like it had like a really good vibe on paper. Like the card across the board was really, really strong. But I think it did under-deliver in a few areas. So I was a little bit disappointed about that, to be honest with you. So many interferences in the show. It was so hectic, had a really chaotic vibe. But the return of Kairi Sane was honestly the biggest bonus for me out of everything that happened on the show. Kairi coming back was just big. It's huge, and I'm really excited to see how that goes from here on out for both her and Io and everything else involved with that situation. But yeah, an okay premium live event, could have been better, could have had better matches, but ultimately at the end of the day, you know, we're building up the Survivor Series. So this probably played its part as being like a sub event to get to that particular point pretty soon. But yeah, Survivor Series on the horizon. I'd imagine it'll be things going uphill from there on out. I gave it a 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 is the overall show.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before too. Cards that seem underwhelming usually overperform, and kind of worried that this would do the opposite. It did, in my opinion, as well. It felt like it under-delivered a little bit. And I hadn't really, obviously watched the show and everything, and I hadn't really put together how many interferences we had. And yeah, more matches than didn't had some sort of interference. So that's a good point. But yeah, there were good matches. My favorites were the US and the Io Bianca. Yeah, those Crown Jewel pay-per-views are always kind of in an awkward position where they're kind of in the middle of two, so you kind of got to build quick and now we have 2 weeks ish until the next one, so I gotta put in work to book for that. So yeah, unfortunately these are always kind of at a weird event. I don't know why they don't delay the other ones a little more if they know they're gonna have these every year. But yeah, we've had really bad Crown Jewels that felt like house shows. This didn't feel like that by any means. But it definitely didn't feel like the best one we've had so far. So kind of a middle ground, not terrible, not great. They had only one title change. We had predictions for quite a few title changes. So just the one. So yeah, well, I guess we'll see what happens at Survivor Series. I think they pretty much laid the groundwork for who those teams will be, at least on the men's side. So that should be fun, and we'll hopefully be a little better than this one. Overall, I'd probably give this one a 6.5 out of 10, probably.
Yeah, interesting point you made there about how these events are very much usually just like wedged in between two bigger ones. And I think that is the case of this. Like they really set the card up to make people interested in it and ultimately didn't quite deliver as much as you would have hoped for. So yeah, a little bit of a shame, but yeah, bigger things on the horizon for sure with Survivor Series coming up next. So hey guys, thank you very much for tuning in to the video and podcast. Really do appreciate all of you popping on in. We'll be back with our next one. Well, it'll be when Survivor Series is about to take place. So we're going to try and get these videos uploaded a little bit earlier in advance from here on out. So yeah, see how that one goes down. A little bit of a change of pace and see where things end up. But yeah, Survivor Series up next. See who we're joined by in that one. Should be a good time though. I'm looking forward to it. Big event coming up soon. War Games is back. So that's like the biggest talking point as far as I'm concerned regarding that one. Thank you to Scarlett as well for coming and joining me today. Really do appreciate you, buddy. Thank you for sharing your thoughts about everything that happened on today's show. Shame that we couldn't have the other guys joining us, but obviously, sometimes it just doesn't quite work out that way. We're going to be heading off now, guys. So thank you very much for tuning in again. This has been another KP Plays YouTube video or podcast if you're listening over on Spotify for podcasters, with me, KP, because that would be me, and with Scarlett, because that would be him. Cheers, guys. See you later.